way to be here, across oceans. Some of you have rearranged your summer schedule so you could be here, and some of you have made very last-minute plans to be here, and I'm grateful to all of you for joining us in this. So before I say anything else, I'd like to introduce Leah Shanley, who's our Wilson Center representative and co-organizer. So she's director of the Common Labs at the Wilson Center. The mission of the Commons Lab, you'll correct me if I'm wrong, is to advance research and independent policy analysis of emerging technologies that enable crowdsourcing and mass collaboration with an emphasis on their social, legal, and ethical implications. So she's a geospatial data scientist by training. She served as a science advisor in the Senate, and she has more than 20 years experience engaging local communities in the development of GIS-based decision support systems, enabling collaborative community-based planning and natural resources management. So turn you over to Leah.
Good morning. So welcome to the Wilson Center, not to be confused with the Woody Center at Princeton. The Wilson Center was created by Congress to serve as a living memorial to President Woodrow Wilson, the only U.S. president with a PhD. We are part of the federal government and function like the Smithsonian, so we are a research institution. We host more than 100 scholars from around the world every year, and we hope that some of you will apply. And we are mandated by Congress to connect the scholarly and research communities with the policy community. So it is with this mandate in mind that Pietro and I first conceived of this workshop last fall when the CRA's proposal, or call for proposals went out. Human computation has the potential to play an important role in addressing complex global challenges and informing and supporting public policy and practices. But we must work to create those linkages. So we hope that after this workshop, all of you will help us in sharing those findings with the federal agencies, with policymakers here in Washington, and at the local level. So I'd like to thank the NSF Computing Research Association, including Ann Drobness, Randy Bryant, and Helen Vasily, for supporting and helping to organize this workshop. Couldn't have done it without them. We'd like to thank the facilitators, Luke, Stacy, and Sunny, who have spent a tremendous amount of time working with Pietro and the planning committee to make this happen. And we'd like to thank all of you, as Pietro said, for taking the time out of your busy schedules to be here with us. And I would like to thank our planning committee, including Janice Dickinson and Chaim Hirsch, and especially our chair of our committee, the superhero, Pietro Michelucci. So with that, I'd like to hand it over to Ann for a moment.
Can you all hear me? I'm a former high school teacher, so I forgot to use the mic in class when I use my teacher voice. On behalf of the CCC, I just want to welcome all of you and thank you all for coming. Similar to what Leah and Pietro said, rearranging schedules. We know some stuff came together at the last minute. But I can say on behalf of the CCC, we are extremely excited for this workshop. It's a little different from some of our typical workshops, and everyone's very excited to hear about it, to hear how this works, and look forward to the results. So I will be here throughout, Helen, Andy as well, on behalf of the CRA staff, and we're here to support and do whatever is needed. And at the end, if you want to get reimbursed, you'll have to go through me. So we'll handle all of those, but if you do have any questions, feel free to ask, and just enjoy yourself, and thank you again for coming.
Y'all are probably wondering about Wi-Fi. You can get on the Wilson Center Wi-Fi system with the passwords that are listed here. capital WC, lowercase JUN 006.
So thanks very much for those welcoming comments. And so now, so not to further delay our more central activities, it's actually a wonderful serendipitous introduction that was made between me and Pablo Suarez, who's here at my right, by Matt Blumberg. And Pablo is joining us. He scrambled over here from the Red Cross building just to do a demonstration with us. So he's the Associate Director for Research and Innovation for the Red Cross Red Crescent Climate Center, and he leads initiatives linking applied knowledge with humanitarian work, as well as new approaches to climate risk management, including participatory games for learning and dialogue. And so before we do anything else, in the spirit of this very hands-on workshop, we're going to do something special now. So turn it over
Thank
to
you, Pietro. Can we set the slide?
Yeah.
If you have it handy. Hi, everyone. It's really delightful to be here. I am, like most of you, a researcher by training, system dynamics modeler, but unlike most of you, a decade ago I became a humanitarian worker, which means that I crave for the kind of brain power that is in this room in terms of analysis, and I want to help get it applied. This is the comfort zone of folks like you and climate scientists. Create knowledge, create methods, look at the clouds, cloud is coming that way, there may be trouble, inform, that's posted. The comfort zone of the Red Cross may be somewhere here, which is there's trouble, go help, usually disaster response. These two communities don't talk to each other in a meaningful way. I've tried for a decade to get scientists to speak sense to Red Cross, and they say the probability distribution function of precipitation has evolved in a negative 2 sigma because of El Nino circumstances. And you're the Red Cross, what do you do? That communication is not happening. I'm trying to go to some other place where magic can happen, hopefully us. So that is to be tested, and let's test it with decisions. I'll push buttons here. This is an example of what arrives by fax to my colleagues. This is an actual seasonal forecast received in May 2008 by my colleague Youssef Aishelouch, in charge of 28 countries, disaster management coordinator. Military coup in Mauritania, bloodshed, train first day. Darfur, refugee camps in Chad. Congo-Brazzaville, urban flooding, unprecedented. He receives this fax, which for those of you who cannot read because it's almost intentionally not legible as the fax was, extreme refers to the highest 15% of a historical record of precipitation. That's a definition. Now, because of sea surface temperatures and other things, there's an increased probability, 40 to 50%. Let's make this participatory. It's okay, I prefer to be
no,
loud.
actually, we did
Oh,
this
you're
recording.
recording. So doesn't matter my preference. Can you hear me? So imagine each one of you is Youssef. You have two choices. Look at this fax, put it aside and keep doing what you're doing, or take resources away from Mauritania, bloodshed now, Darfur, homeless, hungry people now, Congo-Brazzaville, people suffering now. Do you take resources away to do something about these facts or no? You have 5 minutes to make a decision before you get on that flight. Stand up if you would do something. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, stop. 3 people stood up, one kind of, is very close to the chair, and one hinted but didn't. A majority didn't do anything. Thanks for representing the real world of the Red Cross. We receive information, we don't really know what it means, we do nothing. So, we're going to make a little playful activity to illustrate what it means for us to have to make decisions given the information around, and begin to hint at how we can work together, hopefully. I'll be using high technology. This is for you guys. Oops. And this is for you guys. You're in charge of the red team. Back row, you're with Pietro on the red team. Allegedly actionable information, audience usually in a passive row, we don't know what happens. My job when explaining these things, people in the passive role, I could feel people's brains shrinking when I talked. That's why we're now doing these more interactive things. Let's play, each one of you a disaster manager coordinator for the Red Cross. You have no choice. That's who you are, not who you really think you are. Okay? You are a team, you're another team, another team, another team, another team. There's going to be a winning team. The team that at the end of the remaining 4, 5, 7 minutes has the most people standing. If you make one wrong decision, you sit down, you're out. Game over for you, but not necessarily for your team. It may be good for your team that you take some decisions that may make you sit down. There are prizes for the winning team. They involve chocolate. There's also prizes for those in the winning team that are standing, not for those who are sitting. And it also involves chocolate. So you have a trade-off over there, individual or team. As mentioned, this is who you are. Your decision wrong, there's a crisis. Your row is your team. And you have two kinds of decisions. If you think that the rains will be good, then you invest in long-term stuff, training people, writing proposals, changing the vehicles, changing the tires of the vehicles, learning about climate change, whatever. If you think there may be too much rain, you have to prepare for it. In the metaphor, it's an umbrella. In the real world, it's prepositioning relief items, activating the contingency plan, spending money, spending time. You express that by doing this. Okay? So everybody please stand up. Let's imagine in this row, the two first people are protecting against rain, and in this row, the first 4 people are protecting against rain. Everybody else hopes for good rains. Please show it. If you do nothing, you will sit down at the end of the round. This is the rains. It's a 5. What does it mean? Those of you who are like this made the wrong decision. You physically sit down. Do it. Everyone else is standing. We move on to the next year.
So it's bad only if it's a 6.
A 6 is too much rain. This is not a cube or a die. It's the probability distribution function of precipitation based on the past record. Okay? Everybody stand up. Now we're playing for real.
1 to 4 is nothing?
1 to 5 is no problem. This is good. If you do this and there's 1 to 5, you sit down. A 6 is too much rain. If you're like this, you sit down. Play 3 to 4 rounds depending on time. Rules clear?
Yeah.
You have about 45 seconds to make a collective decision if you care. Very important rule. There has to be blocks or sub-teams. So in your row, you cannot be like this, your neighbor like this, and your other neighbor like this. On this side, those who are protecting against too much rain. Further side, those who are like that. Any glitch means that you have a lack of coordination. Nothing gets done because you failed to fill the form. The donor doesn't send you money. You do nothing. Everyone sits down. For the back row, this side is on this wall, and thumbs up, good rains is on that side. So you have to make 2 subgroups before the deadline. And very clearly, I will say 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and stop. And when I have said stop, you are either like this, or you sit down. Ready, set, go. 45 seconds or so. And you're rolling for these 2 plus minus. Yeah. After my countdown. So 6 minutes. So you can already tell the room has changed. 20 seconds. Ten seconds. 6, 5, 4. A lot of people are not doing anything yet. 3, 2, 1, and stop. Okay, in this row, 2 people. In that row, 2 people. In this row, only 1 person. In that row, 3 people. What about the back team? 2. So you can tell that there's cohesion in your approach. It's 2 plus minus 1, but still same information, different decisions. Story of our world. We don't have a standard operating procedure. Let's see what happens. Rains are coming. Let's see if we can make it here. If it falls, it counts, eh? It counts. It's a 5 for these guys, a 6 for those guys. So here, those who were protecting sit down. You guys are in trouble.
So the umbrellas.
The umbrella standing, everyone else sitting. Moving on to year 2, you have 45 seconds. Twenty seconds. 10 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and stop. Okay, check this out. Silence, please. Thanks for your attention. Please show what you were showing, which was that. When I said stop, you have no choice. When I said stop, you were like this. That's the instruction you submitted. So please go back to that position, even if you change your mind. Yes, thank you. Remember, in the Red Cross, it's not like you do it once and then you start having a conversation. This means that you're actively doing stuff like preposition relief items, training people, evacuating people or whatever. Now, I want to highlight a few things. On this side, 2 out of 6 or so. Back row, the lone survivor. Oh, actually, there's 2, I see. In this row, this is very interesting. This is especially meant for you to hear. You know this probability distribution function. It hasn't changed. 3 out of 3 went for flood protection. Yeah? Thanks again for incarnating the thinking of the Red Cross. We are now preparing, taking action that takes place next season for last year's situations. Maybe you have a crystal ball that tells the future, I don't know. Throw the red, I'll throw the yellow. There we go. Oh, you got lucky, eh? What is it? It's a 2, so those who were protecting sit down. Everyone else stand up. This row, it's a 1, so everyone there is eliminated. Now, third year, you may want to pay attention. If you don't, you don't. You just got this fax. This represents the new probability distribution function of precipitation. And if you were distracted, live with it. You got this fax, you have 45 seconds to make decisions.
Wait, what's the change? It used to be 1/6.
You got that fax.
Wait, where are we? Where are we?
You're in the place with the green pixel.
Okay.
Thanks for asking.
So we're 1 and 5. Sorry. Yeah.
You have 20 seconds.
Same thing.
Same game, but that's a fax you just received.
It's 50-50.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and stop. A few things to highlight. We had one colleague who asked, like everyone in the world, in the real world does, wait, what, how, why? And he said, that's the facts you just got. But wait, what, it's the rules? Yeah, same game as before. And at the very last second, with a face that said, I have no idea exactly what will happen or how I should take action, so he went like this, with much less passion than in preceding rounds where you were assertively making a decision. Over here, we have a person saying, wait, what, how, why, what is this, what does it mean? What is it? And someone said it's that instead of 1 in 6, it's 1 in 2 or 50-50, which is exactly what this means if you have the training that you have. Look at the, depending on how you count, 10 to 100 million people of the Red Cross, Red Crescent family. It's not a majority of folks like you. It's a majority of people who are very good and very smart at getting things done, but not at reinterpreting this. Of course, what will happen is a 50-50 chance you get the red, I get the yellow. Yeah, I'll flip this. When it falls, it falls. This is bad news. This is too much rain. This is good news, depending on what you did. Good rains. All right? It's just the same in different language. Let's flip it. This is a flood, for those who are not seeing.
So we have a flood.
And we have normal conditions there. So, sir, you stay standing. Congratulations. On those rows, which had enough people, there was about 50-50 standing and sitting, which is a normal expression of understanding this. More risk of flood, more action to prepare about the future flood. In the real world, what really happens is that not many people do much. Yeah? All right, so everyone who got it wrong sat down already? Good. So we have our last round. Last round. Oh, and by the way, I should highlight that from the perspective of Red Cross operations, that one fell on no disaster. People don't see the physical manifestation of the probability distribution function as it evolves because of sea surface temperatures. What they see is whether it rains or not. When I tell people in Dakar, in Niamey, in Ouagadougou, which exists, it's the capital of Burkina Faso, and I had to go there, I didn't know it existed. When you go there and say, because of El Nino, the chances now increase, so you should do more about flood risk. And before I had this, they made decisions and then it rained normally. They not only hated me, but distrusted even more science. Now with this, they kind of understand that there's a decision under risk. Last round, have you heard of climate change? This is the new probability distribution function of precipitation. Would you mind holding this? It used to be, I carried around the cone of shame that my cat had after surgery. But we optimized the design. This is the new probability distribution function. I will throw it up in the air, like I did with everything else, with a little spin. It will fall. Three things can happen. Falls like this, good rains. Fall like this, a drought. We didn't have a time to play with a drought, but it would be bad news if you had to do drought management. Falls like this, too much rain. Good idea to go for an umbrella. Okay, what are you going to do? You have 45 seconds. Good luck.
How does one indicate it's going to be a drought?
Drought doesn't matter to you. You only care about either flood or no flood.
And it's the same probabilities?
No, this I could be showing you an IPCC graph or something.
Can you express that in terms of like a D20?
Can I?
Can you express that in terms of probability?
I would have showed you a D20 if I had. 20 seconds. 10, 9, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and stop. So in this group, we had 1 in 3 going for flood. In this group, we had 1 in 2. And in this group, we had no flood. So far, you've been getting it very right. I am not going to toss it for 2 reasons. One is that we don't have time. We want to get on with the substance. A second one is that, you're frustrated, aren't you? You want to know what will happen. He asked me the question, if you had to express, I think I'm quoting and not paraphrasing. If you had to express the probability with a D20, what would it be? So that reveals that he's not only familiar with statistical theory, but also with games. A D20 is a 20-sided die. Okay? My answer to him was, I'm not answering that question because what scientists are telling me is all over the place. Some say it's getting wetter, some say it's getting drier, some say we have no idea, some saying it's no change. Right? So this is what we live with. People have to make decisions. And my reason for being here is this. Why do I want human computation for humanitarian work? I don't have the time to do this in every one of the 187 countries where I have to manage programs. There aren't competent decision scientists, climate scientists, and humanitarian workers who have those 3 attributes in their same brain in those 186 countries with expertise in water, health, hurricane preparedness, and so on. The only way forward is to take advantage of a lot of brain power that is most competent, just not trained, and a lot of analytical power, for example, computers, that can provide the analysis that is automatable. So as of now, we're in this phase. When I say to my colleagues who are expected to be trained by me now, and thank goodness I found someone else to do something else to be here, when I say I'm working on crowdsourcing and human computing, they go like, huh? What does that have to do with my colleagues? I have a project now in Malawi. You may have heard there's an El Nino brewing, unusual warming of the Pacific waters, changes the chances of precipitation, extreme rainfall, Southern Africa and Northern Africa. They're asking me what to do. And I tell them, I'm not going to join that teleconference because I want to be here, because of human computing and crowd. Of course, they don't agree, they don't get it. My hope is that we can go, that you over these 3 days can go from the huh to the aha. This is how we can make something happen. And I hope it's not only about modalities and software platforms and so on. I hope it is about real people making real decisions who can be helped by whatever happens over these 3 days. I'm very grateful to Pietro for the opportunity and very grateful to you. The winning row is clearly this one. So the row wins 1 chocolate. Each individual wins 1 chocolate. And this is a consolation prize for everyone else. Fight for it. Thank you very much, guys. Much appreciated. So I do have to run.
Yeah.
But that's yours.
Yeah,
Oh,
please
and
leave it.
For those of you who are interested in some publications on how we use games for humanitarian work, I'll leave them here. First come, first serve, share. They're all available in PDF for free. Published by BU, Games for a New Climate. Using games to experience climate risk. Allow me to have an Argentinian moment. I'm from Argentina. We're supposed to be bragging jerks. This is yours truly, with the same frisbee you saw flipping, throwing. I said in the White House, this is not a frisbee, this is a hurricane. If it hits you, you're in trouble. Everyone stand up. And then I rolled the dice. They didn't know what was going on. I saw it, I threw it, hit in the chest. People had to sit down and so on. And in 7 minutes, they understood something. Yeah. I want to do the same with you and digital stuff. I look forward. Thanks again.
Thanks again.
Good luck to you. And I'll be back on Friday for sure.
Oh, great. Great. He's going to check up on us to make sure we did our homework. So after that, I'm not really sure I have anything else to say. We could probably just go home at this point. No, that was great. So I don't know about you. For me, conjured up all kinds of human computational sorts of ideas and considerations. There's an element of social pressure as you're going through the game. There's an element of cognitive bias, right? And humans aren't particularly great at Bayesian kinds of logic. So I thought very thought-provoking. And to use something like this, to use a human computational exercise, not so much for the human computational output itself, but as an instructive tool. So it's a very interesting application space, I think, for human computation. So now that you're all awake, we can move forward. So I know I've acknowledged a few people already, but I really wanted to thank some people. My co-organizers, sorry, I don't know if you can read this. So just to point them out. So Janice Dickinson, if you could just, raise your hand. Chaim Hirsch, there he is. And Leah Shanley, who you've already met. And she just walked in as I spoke her name. Truly, the story that underlies this workshop was a collaborative process among the co-organizers, we wouldn't all be here except for their very creative and visionary input. So I'm grateful to all of them for their support throughout the development of the workshop and for the real substantive input. So we have also the Computing Community Consortium to thank. The funding organization of this workshop, and Ann Drobness, if there she is in the back. She, director of the CCC, and really the logistical sort of strong arm in getting everything put together on the CCC side of things, and Randy Bryant, there he is. So. Sort of a special thanks to Randy. I'll make it a quick story, but so when we first reached out to Randy about the idea of doing this workshop, it was scoped a little differently, and the answer that came back was, no, sorry, thanks for the idea, but it's not going to work out. It's much nicer than that and more informative. And so we went back to the drawing board and we said, the instructive feedback was actually quite helpful, because it turns out that we really had hoped for a broader scope, but we didn't realize that that was aligned with the goals of the CCC. And we came back to Randy, and he was willing to give us a second chance. And it's because of that second chance, him and his committee, that this worked out. So thank you, Randy, for that opportunity. I want to acknowledge Luke Homan and Stacy Weitzner in the way back there. So been working very closely with these two world-class facilitators. They're both operating for a facilitation organization called Sunny Brown Inc., INK. It turns out that Sunny Brown is sitting to my right, and she's a participant in the workshop. She has a very creative background, and if you're interested in looking at the world through the perspective of doodling, then I recommend you look her up and see the book that she's written, which I found quite enlightening. So Luke and Stacy, so Luke was instrumental in the conceptual flow of the workshop and providing a kind of scaffolding that fit our goals, and Stacy as well. And Stacy is also a trained, see if I get this right, live visual capture artist. Did I say that right?
We are
Info doodle. So not only are we going to capture the output of the workshop, but it's going to be a work of art. So, many thanks to Matt Blumberg and Michael Whitbrock. Matt, there he is, and Michael, who helped reach out to some folks that we might not otherwise have been able to connect with. And then absolutely grateful to the workshop support staff, Elizabeth Tyson and Melissa Gedney, and Helen Vasali from the CCC, who have been, making real contributions to all the logistical developments of the workshop. So thanks to all these people for making this happen. And so just by way of background, so I'm a cognitive scientist. I spent the last 8 years developing and executing programs at DARPA. I had a book project that many of you were involved in on human computation and some various other community activities. And I've been interested in the space of human computation in a few areas, particularly around augmenting crowds or augmenting groups. So project in massively distributed problem solving, organismic computing, which is the idea of shared sensing, collective reasoning, and coordinated action in real time. And more recently, exploring some ideas about crowdsourcing the interoperability of electronic health records, basically solving the problem that your physician's records don't talk to the hospital records, and using human computation approaches to do that. So, okay. This is a legend. Okay, caught me off guard. So this is a legend for the slides. In the top right corner of the slides that you're going to see, you will either see, oh good, you can see my arrow. So we have presentations, we have rapid concepts. These are the 1-minute presentations that many of you have provided, and we have activities. And the distribution is going to be some of these rapid concepts, a few of these, and then lots of this activity. So if you think you're off the hook because you're not presenting, guess again. We're going to really roll up our sleeves. Okay, so what are we doing? So I'm going to try to, in the next 30 to 35 minutes or so, answer these questions. Why are we here? What is our goal? How are we going to get there? Why are we doing this now? can we really make a difference? And I'll take a stab at this one. What is human computation anyway? So, why are we here? I can only say, for me personally, that the reason I'm here is because I have children, and I would like to leave them with a world that's better than the one that they came into. And I believe that we're heading in the opposite direction. And I think that human computation is one of our last best hopes for changing that trajectory. And I always like to show this slide in many of my presentations. This has been an inspiration to me. This is the great law of the Haudenosaunee, the people of the Longhouse. The Longhouse also representing communities coming together. In every deliberation, we must consider the impact of our decisions on the next 7 generations. So, more tangibly, we've created problems collectively. And to solve these problems we've created collectively, I believe we need collective solutions. Another way to put it is to overcome the challenges that result from collective behavior, we must invent new collective solutions. And the other very concrete reason is that with the democratization of technology, individuals have become increasingly empowered. So that now, individuals and small groups are becoming, are approaching the level of capability as some states, which means that an individual can be very influential on the fate of many, many people. In the limit, individuals become omnipotent. And when you have 6 billion, 7 billion, how many are we up to now in the world? 7 billion. Do we have an aggregation method we can use to kind of pull that together? So with that many people in the world, something could potentially go wrong when the wrong person gets that amount of power. So I believe that human computation can help restore the balance of power by re-empowering groups and restoring the balance of power between groups and individuals. So one of the questions we're going to ask in this workshop is, why are you here? I have my reasons, you have your reasons, and they may not be the same, and that's okay. It will be interesting, and we'll talk more about why we want to ask that question when we get to that. So what is our goal here? So in the materials you've received, in the title of the workshop, we've said roadmap. Okay, roadmap is kind of an abstract idea. Well, what do you mean by a roadmap? Well, we want to connect research areas to human computation solutions. Okay, but what does that mean? So this is just to say, and I'm not going to go into this now, we'll get to it later, but this is just to say, this is a model of a roadmap. And at a very high level, what this does is it describes dependencies between research areas and solutions. It classifies solutions and classifies research areas. It describes the disciplinary contributions to the various research areas. It describes risks, and it provides a context from which we might expect to have successes in some of these areas. And it shows these things evolving over time. That's basically what we mean by a roadmap. And this, or something like this, will be a visual tool that will eventually assist us in putting together some pitches to the White House. So, so how are we going to get there? So this is the time map. Day 1, right? Okay. So the next thing I'm going to talk about is what we mean by human computation. Then we're going to do this exploration of what's motivating us to be here and participate in this. Then we want to do an exploration of societal problems, independently of thinking about human computation. What are the problems that face us? Let's stretch that space out and see what we find. How do we address those problems today? using human computation. Okay, and then what else could we do? What are some new human computational solutions that we could pursue? All right, and we're going to do all of that today, if you can believe it. I hear some skepticism, but it will happen. So, in day 2, once we have these ideas of some HC solutions that we want to explore, then we ask the question, so I don't even want you thinking about this part today, right? We want to delay this until tomorrow, but we're going to start to look at what are the research areas that could support these solutions. What's the research that already exists? What's the new research that needs to be done? Who's going to contribute to that? And as you can imagine, we're getting closer to having the ingredients at this point for a roadmap. And then Luke's got a great activity to help us think about what the potential risks are. Okay. Then we're going to actually generate some solution paths. We're going to split up into groups, and we're going to create mini roadmaps. Groups are going to line around certain areas and create solution paths for those areas. Then we get to do something really special, which is we get to, we'll have a guest on Thursday afternoon, which is Tom Khalil from the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy. He's basically the highest level person at the White House who really deeply understands and appreciates human computation. It's a rare opportunity, and not only does he appreciate these things, he's been instrumental in advancing this science through policy. Among other things, he has lots of experience in taking workshops like these and taking the output from those workshops and turning them into national research initiatives. So this will be great. And then finally, in our half day on day 3, we're going to have a group session where we take all these individual roadmaps and we're going to, as a group, coalesce them into a single roadmap. And our live visual capture artist, again, I'm not sure I'm saying it right, infodoodler, is going to represent that for us graphically. So that's our plan. Any questions so far? Okay. Why are we doing this now? So in the past few years, there's been a lot going on in this space, and I think there are lots of indicators that this is accelerating and heating up. I think around 2009, 2010 timeframe, maybe Chaim can corroborate, Chaim created the SOX program at NSF, right? And so I'll just read this to you. The SOX program seeks to reveal new understanding about the properties that systems of people and computers together possess, and to develop theoretical and practical understandings of the purposeful design of systems to facilitate socially intelligent computing. Okay. David McDonald? There he is. So Chaim created the program. Kevin Krauston, who's in the back, was a PI in the program. David McDonald was a PI. He conducted a workshop that had, I wasn't there, but the posters are all online, which is great, and they're wonderful. And so I recommend, and we'll make these slides available, that you check out some of these posters. All wonderful new ideas, new research in this space.
I also want to make sure to give credit where credit's due. So this thing was brewing within NSF. David interviewed to be a program director and gave his interview talk, which was exactly what SOX was. So, you know, David gets a lot. If you like it, David gets a lot of the credit for its shape, and if you didn't like it,
Great.
And I get the blame. Thank you.
I get the blame for things like it wasn't enough money or, you know.
Right. All right, thanks for that clarification. So with the proper attribution now. And then Howard Wackler, who became the new director of IIS, created the follow-on program called Cyberhuman. Is Howard here yet? I think he'll be joining us at some point for the workshop. Cyberhuman Systems, I think, and Kevin Crouston, who is the current program manager for that, might be able to better explain what this graph represents. But I take it as a broadening of the work that was begun by SOX. Is there anything you'd like to add, Kevin, about the scope of this program? In one sentence? No. Okay.
And also just give credit where credit's due. This thing developed, if any of you know Amy Baylor, she played a key role in framing things this way, which gave a lot of clarity internally.
Great. Thank you.
So
Yeah. Yeah. Appreciate that. Yeah. Please do speak up about. I want to make sure that the right people get credit for these things. So. There's been the HComp workshop for several years now, and then last year it was a full-out conference, and this year again it will be. This is the tagline, right? Submissions are invited on principles, studies, and applications of systems that rely on programmatic access to human intellect to perform some aspect of computation, or where human perception, knowledge, reasoning, or physical activity and coordination contributes to the operation of larger computational systems, applications, and services. It's a fairly broad space, but it's another nice definition. So here we're understanding in different ways from different people and different organizations what we mean by human computation. Is Jeff Bigham here? There he is. Sorry, I missed you, Jeff. So Jeff is going to be chairing, the 2014 HComp conference. Last week, we had the Collective Intelligence Conference. If I hadn't been so busy working with my colleagues on this one, I would have loved to have participated in that. This is what the collective intelligence folks have to say. Collective intelligence is about human computation, social computing, crowdsourcing, wisdom of crowds, prediction markets, for example, group memory and extended cognition, collective decision-making and problem-solving, participatory and deliberative democracy, animal collective behavior, organizational design, public policy design, ethics of collective intelligence, ethics, right? Computational models of group search and optimization, emergence and evolution of intelligence, and new technologies for making groups smarter. And Tom Malone was a co-chair with Jeff Nickerson for this conference. And Tom, if you could just, there he is. Thanks so much for being here and carrying that work into this workshop. And there have been other activities. This is by no means a comprehensive list. I conducted a workshop at SocialCom on considering the benefits of advancing social computing as a discipline. David Allen Greer, right here, and myself started this special technical community of the IEEE as a way to allow anybody, academics and non-academics, folks from industry, to all be part of the same conversation about human computation and its evolution. I can provide links if anyone's interested in joining that. We haven't had a lot of activity on this. It's been more of a vehicle for disseminating about upcoming events and things, but we'd like to see some real substantive discussions start to take place, and this is as good a place as any to do it. I'm not going to say too much about this. This was a wonderful opportunity and a wonderful collaboration. And the only way that all of this could have happened in a single year is because all the folks who were participating were really heavily engaged and invested in the advancement of human computation and bringing the knowledge from their discipline into the field. Just to sort of see the distribution, folks who were part of that project, they could just indicate. Yeah, so many thanks. Real honor to work with you on this. And now carrying forward from that multidisciplinary effort, we're starting a new journal, and we expect to have our premier issue of Human Computation in the beginning of the fourth quarter of this year. And I think many of you here are also involved in some way with this activity. So there's other stuff going on. In the government, there's an organization called NIDARD. And we're grateful to have the director of NIDARD here with us today, Dr. George Strawn. Thanks for being here, sir. So NIDARD is the organization that bridges federal agencies toward collaborative research agendas. You'll correct me if I go straight here. Okay. So the PCAST is the Presidential Council of Advisors for Science and Technology to the President. And in 2013, their second recommendation was that there should be a collaboration of federal agencies to coordinate an initiative in social computing. And so, Kevin Krausen formed a subcommittee and has been leading this subcommittee. And so we have active engagement from various federal agencies. And I think, Ram, aren't you a regular participant of that? So this is to say that there's interest in federal agencies in this area and regular engagement, and we bring speakers in from the research community and from industry into these meetings to see what's going on and where it makes sense to create new programs and put taxpayer dollars. This is just to say, lots of agencies involved, probably a few three-letter agencies that, we're best advised not to put on this list. So all of this is to say that it's time to pull this all together and make a plan for our future that our leadership can stand behind. That's why we're here. And as you can see, we have lots of the folks in this room who have been pioneers in this space and visionaries. So we're all here together. We're going to make a research roadmap. We're going to create policy briefings. We're going to have lots of great new human computation research, and we're going to save the world.
What about tomorrow?
Sounds great. How about today? So, can we really make a difference? Okay. You bet we can. We have great conditions, right? So, look around, and that's probably one of the single greatest conditions is the people in this room. We have world-class facilitators. So you can put a bunch of great people in a room and nothing can happen, right? So, well, things will happen, but it's not what you expect and hope will happen. We're very fortunate to have these experienced folks. And by the way, Luke, who's sitting quietly in the back of the room, is a human computational researcher in his own right. And he's doing some really interesting work in collective governance. So he's not going to talk about that during the workshop, but he has qualifications that transcend facilitation that are relevant to this space. And his deep appreciation of this space has made him an excellent collaborator as we develop the workshop. Thanks to the help from our facilitators, we have a carefully designed process. We're going to have a visit from the White House Office of Science Technology Policy to help us fine-tune our roadmap. And we have in our back pocket Leah Shanley, who's an experienced Hill briefer, and who's going to help ensure that we make an impact. No pressure, Leah. So, how are we on time? We've got 7 minutes left? Is that what I heard? Okay, all right, you just let me know. So, we've already sort of talked about, just by looking at what some of these other organizations use as a definition for human computation. but it was Matt Blumberg who suggested this metaphor to me first. Others have since suggested this metaphor. This is the blind men and an elephant. And so coming from different disciplines, you know, there's a different perspective. Oh, well, if you're an HCI person, human computation is all about having the right interface, the right interaction paradigm. I mean, clearly that's really, really important, okay? But if you're a psychologist, it's really about human behavior. It's about getting people to participate. You know, it's about economics. It's about participatory mechanisms. And if you're an AI person, well, ultimately, this is just another form of artificial intelligence, right? We're just, we're cogs in the AI loop now. So historically, you know, folks have worked in their own disciplines in isolation to a large extent, publishing their papers in their own journals. We have an opportunity now with the new journal and coming together more frequently at the Collective Intelligence Conference, at HComp. We're hoping to see more and more multidisciplinary crossover. We're seeing that these conferences are starting to open up, recognizing the value of these other disciplines and inviting more people to come in. And we're seeing behavioral scientists, for example, like Janice Dickinson, who's willing to go out on a limb and actually sit in a room full of computer scientists at HComp and listen to what they have to say and ask the questions that a behavioral scientist would ask and have them patiently answer them so that we start to have a meeting of minds across these disciplinary chasms. So someone pointed out to me, quite cleverly I thought, that human computation could be another perspective on this elephant rather than the name of the elephant. And I think that's worth thinking about. So, the evolution of computation. So we call it human computation. Some of us call it human computation. You know, used to be computation was, you know, adding two numbers together. And then we developed, you know, processes that could be automated, and we call them algorithms. And that's what computation was. And then with artificial intelligence, we would start to think of things more abstract, like symbolic reasoning and pattern recognition, as forms of computation, or as manifestations of computation. And now, as we introduce humans into the loop, humans who have creativity and intuition and can do a kind of synthesis that machines, you know, that still eludes machines, we can come up with a more general and encompassing definition of computation called information processing. This is debatable, but this is a framework for thinking about this. So human computation can be a person and a machine working together to solve a problem. We often think about it, though, in terms of many humans involved in some kind of a process. And it could be a technology agnostic process. David Greer is going to talk about some historical examples of that. But today, when we say human computation or crowdsourcing, we tend to think about our technosocial infrastructure and people being connected by machines and networks and some kind of goal-directed behavior. So here's a definition, no better or worse than any of the other ones. The design and analysis of information processing systems in which humans participate as computational elements. Okay. This is the definition that didn't offend too many people. This was socialized. This is an evolving space, and this definition, I'm sure, will change over time. So, key concept when we're talking about humans and machines, right, is what do humans have to bring to the table? What do machines bring to the table in terms of their strengths? And how do we properly leverage those two things? So, machines are good at counting. They're precise. They're objective. They perform calculations. They give us persistent storage. I'm heavily relying on my laptop. That's my state space. If you destroy my laptop, you know, it's as though I know absolutely nothing anymore. Data integrity, process execution. Okay. What about humans? So, you may not agree with everything on this list. There are many lists like this. In fact, Jordan Krauser wrote a great paper that has probably a much better list than this one. Humans, inference, arguably, visual perception, linguistic ability, abstraction, world knowledge. I think this is really important. This is a very hard problem to build world knowledge into machines in a usable way. Social cultural awareness and creativity. So this actually suggests a kind of a continuum, right? And what we can imagine is that as AI methods advance over time, that slowly machines will be able to do more and more of these things. We don't know how long that's going to take. We don't know which ones are going to be the really tough ones. But there are a lot of people who believe this will happen. Doesn't make it true, but it could be true. And this suggests sort of a labor problem, right? Human labor categories will increasingly narrow to include only those abilities that distinguish us from machines. This is a problem. This is an opportunity. It's something to think about. So, with that, I'm going to turn this over to David Allen Greer. And by way of introduction, many of you may know David already. He's an associate professor of international science and technology policy and international affairs at the Elliott School at the George Washington University. He recently completed a whirlwind stint as president of the IEEE Computer Society. I think he's still recovering, as you can tell.
Recovering.
And he wrote a book called When Computers Were Human. So let me
Okay.
pop up your
My slide deck.
slide deck.
And yet my name tag says I'm a science fiction author. And I'm wondering what I've written.
That's,
No idea. If anyone knows the science fiction I have written, I would love to find out.
that sounds like a perspective.
Sounds like a perspective. Am I to sit? Am I to stand?
Yeah, make yourself comfortable.
All right. I'm here because my grandmother made me. What proved to be my last dinner with my grandmother, she put down her fork as we were gossiping about cousins. And you have cousins like my cousins. And so there's an infinite source of gossip there. And she stared me in the face and said, you know, I've always been sorry I never used my calculus. Grandmothers or grandfathers rarely in their last days express dismay that they have not been able to use higher mathematics. It's supposed to be closer to me. Is it on? It's on. All right. And soon she was gone, and I asked my mother. She knew nothing about this. She said my grandmother had not gone to college, no idea what I was talking about. 3 or 4 relatives later, I'd take the risk. I call up the University of Michigan, she lived in Ann Arbor, and said, did my grandmother go there? And if so, what did she major in? 10 minutes later, I had the answer. Graduate, BS, 1921, major mathematics. The mathematics classes of the 20s were highly feminized. Half of them were women, largely because they had been kicked out of medicine 10 years before. And this led me to a world of people who were trained largely to do calculation for higher mathematics. And in doing that, that led me to the book When Computers Were Human. And I'm going to start with this photo here that's going to, variations of it will appear in every talk I give for the rest of my life. This is the Math Tables Project, the largest human computing organization ever assembled prior to the invention of the computer, operated 38 to 48 as a WPA project. If you don't stumble across a footnote that says we must not remember how hard it was to do computation when the WPA did it, and the WPA did a lot of human computation, then you don't have curiosity for what the world is like. The key lesson that I took away from it that I want you is that it predates the internet. We assume it's sort of crowdsourcing, 2007 social computing. That we can find basically any form of it in prior history dating back to the 18th century. That they developed primitive theories for human computation that we are largely ignoring. And that rather than give you a complete list of everything, I want to point out that these computing groups exposed basically every social controversy you can imagine, and that we have so far in our conference, in a short time, largely ignored. Problems with production, employment, the nature of work, the role of the worker in society, and what was meant by individual intelligence. However, if you think about it, the long history should be obvious because modern employment forms are in fact relatively new. If you think about all the structure that allowed us to create modern employments, the vertically organized corporation, employment contracts, employment systems, and even the military where we largely borrowed all of these things. All of these in their structure are less than 150 years old. And yet we did some of these problems before. The picture I should add is Gertrude Blanche, who will also appear in every talk I ever give for the rest of my days, who was the mathematical head of the Math Tables project. Now, when I deal with it, when I started focusing on it, it was general information processing, primarily dealing with higher mathematics, but there was also searching, sorting, and other forms. I looked primarily at task employment. People would come in for short durations, sometimes as fine as microtasking that we would have on Mechanical Turk, sometimes larger. They all tended to have a dynamic form of market control, that you would be doing things on a task and how you priced the job and how you used it was your fundamental control over the organization. And yet it had formal procedures, algorithmic procedures for checking work, combining work, and also doing that work. If we start in the 18th century, we get early forms of freelancing, and the Nautical Almanac is a good example. This is a group that starts in 1767 that hires individual mathematicians. There were obviously no one trained as a mathematician formally, so there were people trained for the clergy to compute the ephemerides for the Nautical Almanac. They were scattered very quickly all over the world. They had very strong algorithmic tools for setting up the process, for doing the process, and for checking it. Harvard adopted these tools wholesale about 120 years later for reducing data in their observatory. The prime difference was that they employed exclusively women. Microtasking, very teeny tasks, either computational or other forms, appear with the Bureau Cadastral, which is the French survey bureau built out of the Revolution in 1793. It operated for roughly 2 years. The Math Tables project, my group that, as I said, has made my career, borrowed that process almost exactly and ran for 10 years. It was the largest operational computing group, I should add, for the Second World War. We often associate things like the ENIAC with the Second World War. Its first operation, of course, was November 45. Finally, data search, data gathering, innovation crowdsourcing, things like that. We can find examples of that in the U.S. Food Administration, which was gathering food data across the nation. The Brits had a similar one operating in roughly 1918. The Literary Digest, which did preliminary work on mass marketing and consumer data gathering, operated from 1916 to 1938 and had something that would be considered massive by any scale now. This is their data processing, their central data processing office. They would typically have data gathering where they were processing 4 and 5 million points without the telegraph. And then the WPA agencies, not only the Math Tables project, but there was a large group of them that were gathering data largely on poverty. They were headquartered over in what's now the General Services Administration building, and they did truly massive data gathering as well. If you look at all of these, rather than run through the chronological story of all of them, I wanted to point out a couple of things. First, they are always associated in history with either economic hardship, when labor is cheap, or subsidized labor costs, and particularly government subsidized the cost of running them. Tom Malone has, in his book, Future of Work, talked about how the computer reduced the costs of transactions and the costs of communications and has allowed new versions of work. In fact, they are old versions of work, but often they were government subsidized because no one could afford to do them without the modern technologies. So we get the Royal Almanac, which is associated with the recession after the 7 Years' War. The Cadastral Bureau is Thermidor, which was a great time of labor unrest. The Harvard Observatory, 1875 recession that really starts the modern industrial age in the U.S. The Coast Survey had a group that they did with the 1893 recession, which was the largest before the Great Depression. And the Math Tables project was originally defined to employ people. And they said, we have a great staff of people out there. How can we put them to work indoors? The photo here is the Harvard Observatory computing room. But in the process of doing this, they expose every social controversy over work that you have ever seen. Adrian Vlack used a large group of people to compute logarithms. They were accused of being slaves, and some of them probably were. Problems of dividing mental work for the first return of Halley's Comet with Joseph Lalande in 1757. The problems of accuracy. Charles Babbage was a great writer on human computation, and he identified what's known as Babbage's law, which is that one problem done by two different people at different times using the same method will tend to produce the same errors. The issue of family as a production unit, which is something I hadn't seen. I think of families in factories and women and children, but in fact dividing the family to the individual. Andrew Urey talks about it, and he is talking about different human computing groups. The value of women's work. Edward Pickering of Harvard bragged about how he could pay them a third as much as men. The economic future. Henry Pritchett, of course, who did a great deal of work about academic pensions and academic security, thought about the problems of individual data gatherers and data processors. Apprentice versus formal learning, George Snedeker at Iowa State, and of course the position of workers at the Math Tables Project. All of these are there, and all of them come to the surface in a very brutal way at times. They also developed theories, error correction, how you can best put together operations, optimizing it, developing algorithms. William Henry Leffingwell's books are in many ways a great roadmap to how human computing was done prior to the Second World War. And scholarly literature in the journal Math Tables and Other Aids to Computation, which the ACM still publishes as the Mathematics of Computing. So if I'm leaving you with anything, it's been around for a long, long time, and the problems that need to be wrestled with, that this group is going to consider, have been around for that entire period. There are people who have had partial solutions using the tools at hand. It is an expensive proposition that technology, in effect, has cheapened and expanded substantially. It represents some of the earliest forms of employment, and all of those forms that we now are considering you can find antecedents for. But in particular, it exposes the controversies of work, the problems of having one person pay someone to do something else. And that, I think, remains one of the great unsolved issues of the day. The last graphic I'm giving you is Neville Mescalin's computing sheet. This is an 1783 one. He did them 16 years prior. It's his algorithm for computing in ephemerides. He sent this one to one of his computers who is located in Tidewater, Virginia. So it becomes global less than 16 years after the start, and this is still in the 18th century. So that's my quick history. If you want the whole deal, let me shamelessly pitch my book, which is When Computers Were Human. It's a Princeton book. It is lovely. You'll laugh, you'll cry, you'll put it down with tears in your eyes and say, my God, to have been there and to have been young and to know how to extract square roots by hand. That was heaven.
Okay, so I may have given the mistaken impression that everyone in this room is a human computation expert. There are many human computation experts in the room. Some people are latent human computation experts. And some people who are here are learning about human computation for the first time, but the reason they're here is because they have very interesting perspectives and creative methods to bring to the problems that we'll consider. And so now we have an opportunity to hear from many of you. We're going to do some of the 1-minute slides, the rapid concepts. And the way this is going to work is that Luke is going to say who's up next. At each point, I'm going to advance the slides, and you're going to stay right where you are. We're not going to have, 20 people trying to climb over chairs to get up here. So let me bring that up. Okay. So Luke, who is the first person?
You jumped ahead and that wasn't...
I'll tell you who the first person is going to be.
Yeah.
The first person is going to be Tom. You're going to have to help me with your last name.
Bellstorff.
Bellstorff. Thank you, Tom. Okay. All right. I have to,
See the word normal view on the bottom bar? On the very bottom of that PowerPoint? It says normal view. You can click the little button to the left of it.
on the bottom of PowerPoint. Oh, this one. Okay.
Now click to the left.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Right here.
Yep.
yeah.
Thank you so much. Okay.
Okay, hi, I'm Tom Bellstorff. I'm an anthropologist and ethnographer of virtual worlds, among other things. This is coming out of work I've done for my book Coming of Age and Second Life and other things. Going way back in history, the image on the left is probably what we think is one of the first human images ever made. It's a hand on a cave. Many of my archaeologist experts have think that I'm the first person to point out that, building on an insight from Gregory Bateson, this image is actually not of a hand, but of the gaps between hands. Gaps, often people think separate, but gaps connect. And to me, one of the biggest issues around thinking about digital culture and human computation is the tendency to assign the real to only one side of those two things, and to assume that the virtual or the digital is not real. And what people often forget is, just like synapses, gaps actually connect. The image on the lower left is from 1970, the creation of the first virtual world video place in Maryland, very close to here, where two people were pointing across at different computer screens, and for the first time having their two hands overlap, and one person pointed and the other person, Myron Kruger, pulled his finger back, and they realized they thought they're in the same space. And over again in human history, you see all this pointing. And I've been thinking about digits and the digital, and the way that we point back and forth across the gaps of zeros and ones of computation, but between the online and the offline. And I think it's extremely important for us to think about how reality exists on both sides of this divide. The divide is real, but connects us, and what happens with that, I think, is very important.
All right, thank you. Next up, David Allen Greer.
We haven't heard from him in a while.
Yeah, and if I'd known that I had these two things together, I would have used a different slide.
So, do you want to go anyway, or do you want to skip?
I also wrote, in addition to doing a Princeton University Press book on the history of hand computing, I also wrote Crowdsourcing for Dummies. So, I'll give you a minute.
All right. It's probably a good use of
All
time.
right, next up is, if I say it correctly, Leanne?
Yeah.
Leanne, you're up.
My name's Leanne Gabora, and I'm at the University of British Columbia in Canada. And I guess our task was to come up with a concept that influenced us greatly, and that we could present using pictures. And so what I thought of was the concept of self-organized criticality. And I don't know if people are all aware of this, but it's the idea that if you were to drop grains of sand just one at a time on top of each other, well, then they would start to form a pile. But at some moment, you would get a little avalanche. So some of the pile would sort of collapse a little bit. And then at a certain point, you just drop one grain of sand, and just because of how it hits the grain of sand below it, the whole thing might flatten out. And Stuart Kaufman actually was thinking about how this might apply to the origin of life, and I took these ideas and applied them to what's going on in a child's mind. And so just sort of drawing an analogy to the sand pile. If you had a thought, most of the thoughts that we have, I have to walk the dog or whatever, they don't have very much influence on the overall structure of our worldview. But just like once in a while you get that critical grain of sand and it hits the grain of sand below that, it causes the avalanche, once in a while you have a thought, and that triggers another thought, and that triggers another thought, and it really shifts how you see many things. It changes your worldview. And I study creativity, and this kind of principle seems to be what's going on when you have a creative insight. So I don't know if I've used my minute. I did. Can I just show you something?
Did you want me to advance?
You know what? I don't know if this is going to work.
So yours isn't connected. Mine's connected. I'm running yours here.
You.
Sorry. So I can back up? So you tell me when to hit go.
You know, I've used my minute. The bottom line here.
Go ahead. Go
Really?
ahead. Yeah.
Okay. You'd have to back up a bit more.
Back up more.
Yeah, to when the strings aren't when the buttons aren't connected. So, say you have a bunch of buttons and you drop them, and then you pick up 2 at a time and you connect them with a string. And so now you can shut it. Ta-da. Okay. So, and you just keep on doing that. And initially, you'll just have sets of 1 button connected to 1 other button, but they'll reach a critical point where you pick up 1 button and it's connected to a whole bunch of other buttons. And yeah, keep going. And it turns out these kinds of systems have, and then there's, if you keep doing 1 more, have a really interesting property that they, oh, sorry, 1 more. Yeah, okay. That, and 1 more. If you look at the size of the largest cluster to the ratio of edges to nodes, first of all, they're very unconnected, and then at a key point, they become very quickly very connected. And I've been drawing some analogies between this and how a young child's mind around the age of 4 starts to make a lot of connections and be creative.
All right. That's it. Thank you, Ed.
Thank you.
Okay, so I work in artificial intelligence, in particular looking at ways of building artificially intelligent systems that can collaborate and cooperate and coordinate with each other. And so in developing those techniques, I've been inspired by a lot of human computational systems before I would have thought of calling them human computational systems. So the 2 main directions that I've got on this slide are from the emergent perspective, things like Axelrod's evolution of cooperation, how individual decisions lead to coordinated and joint action, as well as looking at limitations of individuals, which we certainly face in AI systems, inspired by things like Herb Simon's bounded rationality and development of organizations, and the purposeful design, therefore, of systems that will elicit the proper behavior of the cooperative entities. So the idea here is that we've been developing these techniques for our artificial agents, and our goal is to be able to think about how we can take those ideas and inject people back into them, and how those systems have changed in ways that will exploit or prohibit people from being able to use them effectively.
Matt Bloomberg.
This is a book that was very influential for me. I read once a description on the back of a biography of somebody else, totally unrelated. It was a science biography, and the person said that the author, like all good science writing, the author makes the reader feel like a genius. And I always thought that that was a good description of good writing. This book, I contend, will actually make you a genius. It's about what minds are, and one of the interesting things that I think might be useful in our thinking here is this idea that thought as exists in your head, culture, evolution, that these are all instances of the same process fundamentally at different scales and in different media. And when we talk about creating groups that are intelligent, this has been useful for me. We have to have some notion of what intelligence is, of what mindfulness is, and I thought this would be a great place to start for anybody who's interested.
Thank you.
Nathan?
Thanks. Hi. Yeah, so I picked a contemporary citizen science project that I find really interesting. It's old weather. I don't know if people in the room might actually be involved in this project. I'm not sure. It's a project where citizen scientists, people out in the world, look at weather logs from ships from the World War I era, military ships, British ships for the most part. But they're actually looking for weather reports with an idea of building up an aggregated collection of data about weather from that period and climate and things like that. And I find the project really interesting because I have a history background, military history in particular. And I realized playing with this project just a little bit, they kind of gamified it. They set it up in a way where you can become a captain of a ship and you go through the ranks and you can follow the ship on its course. I found the idea of doing that really interesting, but I wasn't actually very interested in their ranking system. In fact, it turned out, I guess, to be a bit of a deterrent for some players. You get to a ship and everyone's already a senior officer and you're nobody, and it's not actually that interesting. And I'm a game person. I'm a game designer, purposeful game designer. So I was very interested in this project to think about ways to make that gamification more interesting and more contextualized around history and things like that. So.
All right.
Thank you.
Stephen Dow.
I'm Stephen Dow from Carnegie Mellon University, and I am going to share the work of Aaron Koblin, and you can check out his website, aaronkoblin.com. And he inspired me because he showed me that crowds can produce very creative things. And so he's got these great examples of people online sketching small things and then putting them together into these interesting compositions, such as a music video for Johnny Cash, an exquisite forest of sketches that kind of come together and build on each other, a physical mesh that hangs above the city of Vancouver that people can sketch on, so crowds coming together and sort of sketching. So my work on creativity and innovation and crowdsourcing has been largely inspired by this work.
Great, thank you.
All right. Katie Shelton.
I'm Katie Shilton, and so I've been inspired by, well, I've put up here quite a bit of work in medical ethics. So I'm really interested in this idea that, yes, discovery is our goal, but where do we stop, right? What is the line we draw where we say we're not going to do that? And I think medical ethics has some good examples of cases as Henrietta Lacks in the corner where we've said, you know what, we could find out amazing things, but we're not going to go there. We're not going to do that, right? So how do we draw those limits for ourselves? And the AOL data leak is an interesting example where a community of researchers came together and said, yeah, we're not going to use that data. You know, it's not good data. It's not private enough. So I'm interested in those limits, what we're willing to do. And Calvin and Hobbes always sets those limits well, or talks about those limits well, the limits of discovery and where we might not want to go.
I'll leave that slide up for 20 more seconds so you can read the comic. Oh, is it too small?
All of the slides are here for people if
Okay.
you want later to go.
We have a nice visual wall. So now we can go to Larissa.
So I'm a computational neuroscientist, and the brain, just as this group of people, is made of different parts with individual functions. And cooperation or integration is essential for the proper functioning of the brain and for this executive board, or for that matter of a country. And integrated information, also labeled phi, the Greek letter, is a measure of cooperation that quantifies to what extent the whole system does more than just the sum of its parts. And phi can also allows assessing how a system clusters into very integrated units with weaker connections between them. And at least for biological brains, the capacity to integrate information is a primary function, and it has been related to cognitive flexibility and also consciousness.
Thank you very much.
And I think we're going to go with 12. So
Sure.
Who brings us home for the first round is Andrew. Andrew Bernat.
He had to step out. Can he start the next one?
He'll start the next one.
Mike Webster, would you?
It's okay. We'll just have Andy start the next one.
Oh,
That's fine.
start the next one?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
well,
that's
then
great.
we should attend to the next item on the agenda.
Okay, thanks. Right. So so it's a privilege to introduce our next speaker. It'll be a privilege to find out who our next speaker is. So, Mary Catherine Bateson is a writer and cultural anthropologist. She spent 30 years as president of the Institute for Intercultural Studies in New York City. Her books in print include Composing a Life, Our Own Metaphor, and Peripheral Visions, as well as a memoir called With a Daughter's Eye, a Memoir of Margaret Mead and Gregory Bateson. During the past few years, Dr. Bateson has completed 2 projects, a book titled Composing a Further Life, The Age of Active Wisdom, on the contributions and improvisations of engaged older adults, written to raise consciousness of the changing life cycle and to encourage older adults to claim a voice for the future. So thanks for being here. I will, do we have a microphone that we can bring to her?
I can come.
Okay. Does anyone see a microphone floating around, or did it leave the room? Maybe it walked away.
No, I think probably better to come upstairs.
Okay, great.
I just can't find mine.
Right. She's going to come over anyway. Back. Oh, it's blocking. I don't know if I'm credentialed to move this. Even if we just pick up the pieces when I mess up.
Let's do with that.
Oh, it's rolling. Does everybody feel safe over there?
There we go. Can everyone see this?
Much better, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for mentioning. And I'm gonna.
Sorry.
We are rich in chairs.
Golly, you want me?
Yeah, we're.
I'll head to the microphone.
Okay. Yeah. There. Sorry about all that.
You don't have a cell phone or anything near you, right?
Well, it is due to Pietro's persistence that I'm here at all, because he contacted me to possibly contribute to the handbook, and I said, I can't possibly do that. I don't know anything about that, and I haven't time to learn it. So he said, write a preface. And I said, how can I write a preface without reading all the papers and learning enough to understand them? And he persisted, and in a very cross mood, I sat down. Well, I Googled human computation a bit and browsed around and discovered there were some points of overlap and interest, and typed something, and he printed it. And what I typed at that point, and the reason why I'm here and still very much interested in what you're doing, is because I realized that the work in human computation was intersecting with 2 things that I had very much on my mind. One was, how do we engage individuals in our highly individualistic society in acting out of concern for the environment, particularly in the context of climate change, when what they say, no individual can make a difference. All these billions of people are the cause of the trouble, and I can't change that. In other words, it occurred to me that only by rethinking the relationship between the individual and the much larger systems that we belong to, institutional, national, global, biospheric, only by doing that could we arrive at a capacity for responsible action and decision-making. Maybe that had something to do with human computation. and maybe two, it seemed to me, if we could learn to think together, we would be able to arrive at proposals, phrasings, ways of thinking about planetary problems that no individual could come to. Could human computation mean not, like those women in the WPA, crunching huge amounts of numbers, which we are much better done with computers, but is creativity a joint activity? Is insight a joint activity? And can we use computers to facilitate it? So I started thinking about this in 1967, when my father, Gregory Bateson, organized a conference that was held in a palace, in a castle in Austria, on conscious purpose and human adaptation. And this actually was before he wrote Mind and Nature, but his thinking was moving in that direction. And he invited me to be the rapporteur for the conference. And it was an extremely interdisciplinary conference. Had a number of people from the early cybernetics group, had some anthropologists, biologists, philosopher, mathematician. And it was quite contentious. We were sitting around a table and not thinking together very well at all. And some quite personal attacks were made back and forth about the way one person would use another person's data. And as sometimes happens, I think this conference is a little too big for that, but as sometimes happens, I went into a trance, quite literally, on the fourth day, and I came up with the notion that the only way, it started out with the notion that the human body as a self-corrective system is each of our available metaphor for thinking about the planetary biosphere. We are each of us our own central metaphor. Our health, our aging, our learning, our vulnerability, our capacity to heal, all of those things are what we need to understand to deal with societal and ecological problems. And as I say, I went into a trance, made a speech about this, and then subsequently someone said, yes, and a group can serve as the metaphor of a complex thinking system. And we, with our conflicts, with our disagreements and perplexities and high level of irritation, the conference can be our own central metaphor. The fact that everybody was moving, changing positions, responding to stories of environmental degradation and destruction, and societal degradation and destruction, and individual illness and healing or not healing, mental illness and so on. All of that was being woven in. So the book came out with the title Our Own Metaphor, which was with the concept we as a group can be a metaphor of a complex, potentially self-corrective system, and therefore think creatively about potentially self-creative systems. Two things to tell you about it. One is that it was turned down by 20 publishers. The second is it is in print at present in the 3rd edition under the title Our Own Metaphor. And that is what I see. I see two fundamental things that we should gain from human computation. One is a new image of individual responsibility in the larger framework in which we function, and a way to develop that sense of responsibility through participation in which there is some feedback, in which we can internalize the notion that the actions of each individual do have an effect. Without that, we're not going to change anything, and without the feedback, we're not going to change anything. But the second thing is that separate minds can work together as a mind. The boundary of the mind is not the skin around your head. Whether we, this is rather a large group, how far we're going to get as a common mind, I don't know. It's rather large. But that this is a possibility for human beings. And of course, neuroscience has made great steps in understanding the neurological basis for empathy and mutual understanding. How I can feel and think with other persons, so that in addition to the question of responsibility, there is the question of joint creativity that can be studied through forms of joint improvisation. For instance, in dance or jazz, theatrical improvisation, where the effective participation of each individual depends on a very high level of attention to what the others are saying. And that's what happens in jazz, so that it becomes a conversation and has an aesthetic unity. So I'm here, I insist on my ignorance, except that I think that what you're talking about is perhaps the most important thing we could be talking about in the world today. Can we together think creatively? As we look at the different projects, everything from crowdsourcing to brainstorming to different kinds of facilitation of conferences, are we moving towards that capacity? And can we become the mind and consciousness of our planet?
Stealing my paper.
Oh, is that yours?
Nope. This one. Thanks.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. Great. So, next up, it's similarly an honor to have Christina Engelbart join us. She's the co-founder and executive director of the Doug Engelbart Institute. She worked closely with her father, Douglas Engelbart, for over a decade to refine the vision and implementation strategy, develop software and promote the work via writings, workshops, lectures, expeditions, and the first Bootstrap website. And then she then served for 3 years managing operations at Solari Inc., including website development, strategic planning, marketing communications, and economic research. It's a lot of different hats. And helped conceive and produce the Solari audio seminar series before returning to the Doug Engelbart Institute in 2007 as executive director. She's going to be co-presenting, hopefully, there he is, with Adam Shire, who is co-founder of Siri and formerly director of engineering in the iPhone group at Apple. Prior to Siri, Adam was a computer scientist and project director in SRI International's Artificial Intelligence Center, where he was the chief architect on the Kalo project. Adam was also a member of the founding team at Change.org and founder of Genetic Finance. So it's a great honor to have you both presenting, and I'll go ahead and load up your slides and then turn it over to you.
Hi, Adam.
Hello.
Adam, can you see and hear us okay?
I can hear fine. How about the other way?
Yep, it looks like you're lip syncing, but other than that, I think we're good. Okay, I think this is the...
Yes.
Here, going up. Give you the... Yeah, there's kind of feedback or buzzing. Oh, thanks.
Oh, so I don't.
Here, I'll move my stuff out of here, right here. And by the way, an extra note of appreciation. I realized that you had other activities planned for this time period, and you made special arrangements to be able to be here and virtually there in order to make this all work, and we're really grateful to have you. So thanks so much.
Thanks. Well, I was going to stand. Can you hear me okay with this?
Yeah, advance with the down.
So I was going to start with a little bit of history just because it's cool, and then talk about how the history of my father's work informs the future of computing and human computing, and then turn it over to Adam. And Adam, please feel free to chime in at any point. So just a whirlwind tour of my dad's early work as a pioneer in computing and human computing. It started for him in 1951 when he proposed to my mom and realized that he had sort of accomplished all his life's goals of finishing college and starting a steady job and starting a family, and so what else did he want to do with his life? And so he calculated he had about 5 million minutes forward in his career, and how did he want to invest that? So he had a conversation with himself for the next 3 months or so on the way to and from work, thinking about what he would do. And so he settled on wanting to maximize his contribution to humanity, and thought about, different crusades that he could join, as, helping with poverty or solving, cancer or whatever, the different kinds of social problems that one can improve. And then he realized that, wow, each one of those has a common thread, which is they all are trying to figure out what the problem is, how to approach the problem, different courses of action, and engaging with others to do this. And so he realized that capability was really, if you could solve that problem, then every group and every initiative in the world that's trying to work on a problem, or every business trying to advance new products or services, can be that much more effective. So that's what he settled on for his goal. He went back to school and got his PhD and landed at SRI International, which then was Stanford Research Institute, and spent about 2 years formulating these ideas and fleshing them out, and documented them in this 160-page report called Conceptual Framework for Augmenting Human Intellect. And that's what he called also the Program on Human Effectiveness. He was using both of those terms. By 1964, he had the funding and a small research team. They started working on interactive computing. They had to push the envelope of display technology, which was very primitive at the time. He invented the mouse. They were looking at things, what can the left hand do while the right hand is busy, and working on different kinds of things like that. He approached the whole thing in terms of how the mind works now that we have a new medium to support and facilitate our work. How can that help our thinking individually and collectively? And so it was a no-brainer to have collapsible views on the screen and hypertext and things, because the mind can jump around. The mind can look at different levels of detail just like that. So a computer should be able to help you do that. So let's see. And then they also were experimenting with different human aspects of how you work together. So group process, and they brought in organizational consultants and psychologists and someone from Herman Miller to look at the new office furniture of the future and how that could, how does it all work together, and sort of co-evolving the tools and the human together into a pretty fast feedback loop for iterative prototyping. By 1967, they had the group where features in place were supporting computer-supported meetings, and this was an ARPA-sponsored meeting. Everybody had a mouse. They could point on the screen. It was a screen share situation. 1967, he demonstrated everything that was working so far. That all of it was being used operationally by the team every day in their work, including design plans, source code, all of that kind of thing. And so as the target users of their work, they had, again, another pretty tight feedback loop of how to improve the system, and if we could change this in the system, that would allow us to do this in the human side, a new process or whatever, and then how could we adapt the tools to that? And so they had this very accelerated coevolution process going. 1969, they tied into the ARPANET. They were the second node on the ARPANET, so essentially they were the ARPANET. And also started facilitating. I guess they got the contract to facilitate the first network information center. So he was facilitating the first online communities, and that was all a big part of his vision as well. Digital libraries, sort of the first of lots of things. And the preliminary works in graphical user interface and whatnot. Yeah, this was just, it grew to 4 people that year, 4 sites. 1978 is when I came in. I just graduated from Berkeley in cultural anthropology with an emphasis on organizational anthropology and applied anthropology. And so I was all of a sudden realizing that my dad's work was not all about technology. It was mostly about the human aspect of how we work together to be more effective and save the world. And I thought, wow, that's pretty cool. So I joined as an intern, and so that's where I started with the technology. In 1988, we started the what originally was called the Bootstrap Institute, now called the Doug Engelbart Institute, together. And he kept working even though he left SRI and went into industry, and then with the Bootstrap Institute had a neutral platform for carrying on his work. He developed sort of a call to action for society and for the computing arena to really focus on this research problem as one of the greatest potentials for unleashing human potential. So the history, there's all kinds of digital archives and everything on the website, engelbart.org, dougengelbart.org, so feel free to go research more. You can look at highlights of that 1968 demo, which is now known as the mother of all demos, and various other things, why he invented the mouse, how he invented the mouse. But really the technology was such a small part of his work, and he really had a hard time with all the focus later in his life, getting lots of awards for the technology, and it was hard to get people to listen to the human part of it. And so how exciting to have a community called Human Computation. So basically, looking at the vision, he anticipated that we would have an era of accelerated change, that it would be facing change in society going up exponentially, and we're witnessing that in spades. every problem. You take climate change as a perfect example because everything is interdependent and problems compound each other. And so, you know, any one problem you can't look at in isolation because they all compound each other, and it's getting worse faster. And so how do we get the capabilities to solve the problems, anticipate problems before they happen, nip them in the bud, whatever, jump on opportunities that are important for humanity, for business, for society and the environment. Anyway, so this is sort of the landscape of looking at in order to shift our trajectory, which is what, and so I trust that you'll be helping us look at the types of societal problems that So now looking at focusing, given that people are working together, what does that actually look like? And my father was very robust in his exploration of these ideas. What are we actually doing when we work together? What does that process look like? If you take any group that has a shared vision, a shared understanding of their purpose, a shared mission, they're interacting with each other, they're formulating ideas and trying to communicate them in different ways. They're interacting with the outside world. What do we know about these problems? What do we know about our customers? What do we know about our constituency? What do they need? What's already been done in this? Who's working in this area? You know, what are the different marketing aspects of it, and the demographics and the regulatory considerations? And you know, you're always constantly keeping that and integrating it in with the dialogue and the moving forward of plans and designs in your mission. In which you're constantly, concurrently, everybody working together, simultaneously, not always collaborating. So concurrently is really the word, assessing, digesting, and all of that kind of stuff. So it's this whole ecosystem of, okay. And out of this emerges all kinds of records, documents, reports, whatever, plans, designs, and some of it gets captured. And so in an online world, everything could get captured, and how that becomes available to you and without getting overwhelmed, but being able to put your hands on exactly what you need in any given moment. I still struggle with that every day. The tools are pretty inadequate and haven't even come close to, I haven't scratched the surface of what my father envisioned for this. So there's a whole body of work in there. So think of this as the dynamic knowledge ecosystem, with people interacting with people, interacting with knowledge, knowledge interacting with knowledge, tools all interacting with each other in various ways, and some automated, and some just driven by the people. And it's very people-centric, though, and the human is pretty much at the top of the pyramid here. Then we also have, you know, one of the important things is, can this environment help us think and act better? How does it improve how we think and act? And I think, again, the tools tend to be pretty inadequate. That, you know, the way our thinking, the speed in which our mind can work really slows down when we try to operate the computer and get an app going, or try to find a file, try to create a link to someone else's work, and, you know, it really slows us down. So how can the computer really facilitate that in powerful ways? Two more points. Boosting the capacity to improve. So there's improving what you're doing, and then how do you improve? How do you get faster at improving whatever your concept space is? And that looks pretty much the same. So you're working on a mission, and somebody says, wow, could we do this better? How could we do this better? If we bring in this computer tool, that would help us do whatever. That's an improvement process. And so you're going to do the same thing. You're going to be looking out who's doing what in this area, what can we pull in, what's other people's experience, and networking with other people. And so whether it's your own team or your improvement network or whatever, think of yourself as part of an improvement community on various levels. You're improving your mission, you're improving your ability to pursue your mission together. And then improving your ability to do that. So it gets recursive. And what we're doing here is actually that. So my father didn't, for a lack of terminology, just called them A, B, and C levels. And this is it's an important thing, and it's already being implied here. So you don't have to understand it, but just that it's happening. And then finally, augmenting the whole capability. As I mentioned before, there's tools. Everybody's interested in tools, but then there's also the whole human side. Paradigms are a huge thing: organization, customs, language skills, knowledge and learning. And so we put it together in this 5-point model, and this is basically the model that my dad had embedded in his own lab, in which, if you look at the level of breakthrough innovation that they were able to achieve, this was the model that he created in order to get that accelerated breakthrough process going. It was very intentional, and this can be applied in any project or anything. So there's an opportunity to make, take advantage of it here as well.
Great.
So.
Thanks. You're going to switch over to Adam?
To Adam, yeah.
All right, Adam, can you hear us?
Sure. So I'll just say a few words. First of all, I'm here just in support of Christina and Doug's work. They've been huge influence for me in my career, and I try to apply many of the principles I've learned, in what I do. So the way I think of it is I operate in a triangle. So the first is human to machine. So my work with Kalo and Siri was really how can computers augment individuals and teams to help them be more effective in what they do in their daily lives. The second part of the triangle, human to human. So an example might be change.org. The idea is how can you harness the collective intelligence, the collective focus of a huge number of people, global scale number of people, to solve complex, urgent problems. So change.org, we have 70 million people trying to change and make right the world for human rights, for environment, for a lot of the problems that Doug was talking about. And then the third axis of my triangle is machine to machine. How can you harness the resources of computation and really apply this as an aid to do things that humans themselves might not be able to do without these tools. So Genetic Finance is my company, where we have 1.5 million CPUs, so one of the largest compute farms in the world, and a machine learning set of machine learning algorithms that run on top of these machines to try to solve problems in healthcare and genomics and finance that are just beyond scope without kind of supercomputer level access, and we try to democratize the way that this compute power can be created. So those are just a few, those are my kind of past projects. I'm now working on another sort of Doug-inspired project, which is around the tools and community side of things. And the problem when you're having collaborative efforts is how do you get enough people to jump in and buy into the platform so that they can work together. So I'm using one of Doug's ideas of bootstrapping. Find a community who's doing something like developing tools that can get better, the work that they do to improve it will improve their own processes. So I'm targeting software developers and trying to create a new integrated software development environment that applies many of the tool aspects that I think is really important in Doug's work into a better way of building software. And as more people join and improve those tools, then you get the A, B, C levels of improvement. So those are a few ways that I've tried to apply some of the learnings and teachings of Christina and Doug to my work in the aid of kind of human computation collaboration. And I'm very interested to hear what you guys will do in this area.
Right, thanks very much. And Adam, I realize that you're probably, we probably can't see that you're still wearing boxer shorts or something, since it's, 7 a.m. On the West Coast right now?
Oh, I've already driven more than 50 miles, and I've been working for over an hour, so I'm an early riser.
Okay, well, thanks so much for being able to join us for this and for your enlightening comments.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
Okay, the good news is that that it's time for a break. Thanks for a great kickoff, and let's refuel and then.
One minor thing for the break, both over break and lunch, we're going to ask you to stop by the front table at your choice, whichever is more convenient, break or lunch. You will get a cool sticker on your badge, which we will explain in a bit. And when you pick up this sticker, you get an even cooler sticker for the HC logo, which if you're from Silicon Valley, always should adorn a laptop, at least. So we've got a 15-minute break. We're doing very, very well on time. We don't want to start sliding, so I'll see you in 15 minutes.
So, and one note about the sticker.
Stickers are actually on the table right here.
I've been told that the stickers are not permanent. That, you know, if you want to just, you know, pretend like you like it and put it on now and then peel it off when you get home, that'll work okay.
All right.
They're right out here.
But we need people to be